to be able to have an award-winning professor with us from Harold Washington College who teaches tax and accounting and also is an attorney in his non-scholastic life. Welcome, Luis Plascencia, and thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me again.
We're very excited to have Luis because there have been changes in the tax law, and it's important to know how the changes in tax law are going to affect you, and there are special changes that involve people who are immigrants or have immigrants in their families. So we're going to talk with Luis about those changes, but first I'm going to talk about the Chicago Legal Clinic. The Chicago Legal Clinic was founded in 1982 by two brand new lawyers who noticed that there were no legal services programs, low cost or free services in South Chicago. In the 70s, there had been steel mills and there was a thriving community, but the steel mills closed and people lost their jobs, they lost their homes, and they could not go to local businesses, so businesses closed. And pretty much South Chicago became a very sad place to be. And people who needed legal help really had no place to go. So the Chicago Legal Clinic was founded as the South Chicago Legal Clinic for Immigrants in 1982, but a few years later they opened a branch in Pilsen where actually I work, and so it became the Chicago Legal Clinic, and now there are offices not only in South Chicago and Pilsen, but also in Austin, downtown. There are free advice desks at the Daily Center and a free advice and referral office for students of Harold Washington College, where I also teach. And Luis and I are in the business department, and if you want to improve your skills, become an accountant, become a paralegal, learn English, come to Harold Washington College. In any event, we're here to talk about immigration. And I'm going to repeat what I just said in the Spanish language, and then Luis will bring us up to date on things that you need to know as we get into tax services. So, buenas tardes, me llamo Carolina Schoenberger. Yo quiero decirle un poco de la Clínica Legal de Chicago. La Clínica Legal de Chicago fue establecido en 1982 por dos nuevos abogados que querían ayudar a la gente del sur de Chicago. Antes de 1980 había muchas acerías en el sur de Chicago, pero se cerraron las acerías y la gente que trabajaba en las acerías han perdido sus trabajos. También los negocios en el sur de Chicago sufrieron por la falta de clientes. En este barrio no había ninguna oficina ofreciendo ayuda legal a bajo costo. Entonces, los dos abogados establecieron la Clínica Legal de Chicago en un solo cuarto. Actualmente, hay 4 oficinas de la Clínica de Chicago en el sur de Chicago, Pilsen, donde yo trabajo como abogada, Austin y en el centro. También hay varias oficinas en las cortes que ofrecen ayuda legal gratis a la gente con problemas de mantenimiento de los niños, inmigración, también si quiere establecer un negocio, foreclosure, si hay violencia doméstica. Hay también una oficina en Harold Washington College donde somos profesores en el departamento de negocios y esta oficina legal ofrece ayuda a los estudiantes. Si tiene un problema como inmigración, quiere comprar una casa, violencia doméstica, y si es víctima de violencia doméstica, buenas raíces, seguro social para gente en capacidad, testamentos, hay de llamar el número central de la oficina entre las horas de 9 hasta las 5. El número es 773-731-1762, 773-731-1762. So again, if you have any questions during the time we talk, please call the number on your screen at 312-738-1060. Si tiene preguntas, puede llamar al número en su ecrán 312-738-1060. If you have a problem where you need a lawyer or you want to consult with someone dealing with domestic violence, immigration, wills, dealing with property issues, you want to form a business, please call the Chicago Legal Clinic 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Call 773-731-1762, 773-731-1762. I also want to just make a personal comment. Right now, I know that many people are afraid about everything that's going on, the shutdown, the wall. It's hard not to be depressed by this, but we have to continue living our lives. We have to keep moving forward. We will move forward. No one can stop people moving forward. That is what our country was founded on, and I believe that there's opportunity still for people to realize the American dream. So keep going, and don't look back, and don't look sideways, because we're still going to go ahead. With that, I want to welcome again award-winning Prof. Luis Plascencia.
Thanks for having me again.
My pleasure.
As Carolyn mentioned, my name is Luis Plascencia. I'm a licensed certified public accountant, and we also teach at Harold Washington College. I teach accounting and tax classes. My specialty is tax. In my practice, I handle tax return preparation, and I also represent individuals that have tax problems. Individuals that owe money to the IRS, individuals that are getting audited. That's the type of work I do. But today I was going to discuss the tax reform, how it affects immigrants, and also some of the recent updates that also affect everybody, not just immigrants. To get started, and I'm also going to talk about the shutdown, how that's affecting tax season. It's affecting tax season, it's also affecting my business. I'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
But the first thing I want to talk about is, Carolyn and I talk a lot about this particular issue, resident alien. Resident alien is actually defined differently under tax law as it is under immigration law.
Under immigration law, it's the step before, generally the step before becoming a U.S. citizen. You go through a process where you get a card. You're a lawful permanent resident, which means you have the right to stay in this country unless you do something that you shouldn't do, at which point you may have to go before an immigration judge, which, by the way, the immigration courts are shut down now too, so I guess you'll have to wait for a while. But I guess resident alien is defined differently under tax law.
That is correct. Under tax law, a resident alien is defined in one or two ways. Either the individual would have to either pass what's called the green card test, meaning that individual actually does have an actual green card and a valid Social Security number, so they're considered a resident alien. So this would be the permanent residency. So if they have a permanent resident card, they will qualify under the green card test. So that's the first test. The second test is the test that very few people actually know about, and that's called the substantial presence test. In order to meet the substantial presence test, I'm not getting into the details, but I'll just give you a general overview. You actually have to be in the United States a lot. So just to give you an overview of the actual day requirement, it has to be 183 days over a 3-year window. And there's actually set formulas depending on the previous year and the year before that. I'm not going to get into that. But the rule is 183 days. If you meet that test over the 3-year window, if you meet that test, you're considered a resident alien for tax purposes.
And what are the benefits if you're considered a resident alien for tax purposes?
Well, actually, there's a lot of benefits. To get started, I know this is not a tax class, but I want to give you a tax formula just so you can get a general idea of how tax law works. So this is how taxable income is computed. It's your gross income. Let's say adjust your gross income, but it's your gross income minus your standard deduction or your itemized deduction. That's your taxable income. Before the tax reform, it actually included another step, which was, and I'll get into that in more detail in a few minutes. But the current formula is your gross income minus either your standard deduction or your itemized deduction.
Wasn't there some kind of personal deduction?
There used to be an exemption. That's the amount that got eliminated. Personal exemptions. Before, you were allowed a personal and dependency exemption for each individual that for yourself and each individual that qualifies as your dependent. That's been eliminated. So this is what they did as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. They actually approximately doubled what's called the standard deduction. The standard deduction varies by filing status. To give you a general overview, The current standard deduction for single is $12,000. The current standard deduction for head of household it's $18,000. The current standard deduction for married filing jointly is $24,000. So that's currently under the tax reform bill. Previously, it was about half of that. So let me tell you how itemized deductions work. Itemized deduction is actually a sum of certain deductions, certain personal deductions that you're allowed. If the sum of those deductions exceed your standard deduction, you'll get the itemized deduction. So the itemized deductions, I'll get into that in a couple minutes as well. But,
I have to ask you a question because this comes up a lot in my immigration process. People who are married who file as head of household.
Well, to be head of household, you would have to be considered unmarried for tax purposes. So a married individual generally will not qualify. There's a couple exceptions, abandoned spouse rules, but there's a couple exceptions. But generally speaking, if both spouses live in the same household, you cannot claim head of household. You would have to do married filing jointly or married filing separate. And and then the other filing status, if you're single at the end of the year, you're considered single for the whole year. If you get married at the end of the year, you're considered married for the whole year. And that would give you an option, married filing jointly, married filing separate. To get back into regarding why it's important to meet the resident alien test, to meet the resident alien test, you have a choice to either take the standard deduction, again, the $12,000 for single, $18,000 for a head of household, $24,000 for married filing jointly, or the itemized deduction. You want to go with the itemized deduction because that's more. I mean, the standard deduction or the itemized deduction, whichever is more. If the itemized deduction is more, then you go with your itemized deduction. Because if you're considered a non-resident alien for tax purposes, you don't have that option. You don't have the standard deduction. You're not allowed to take the standard deduction. It forces individuals that do not meet the resident alien test to only have to itemize. They only have to claim those itemized deductions. So here are your itemized deductions. We have medical expenses, certain medical expenses. I'm not going to go over the list which medical expenses qualify, but just to give you an overview, doctor visit, insurance premiums, prescription medication, over-the-counter medication does not count. It has to go over a certain number depending on the taxpayer. I'm not going to get into that specific. And then we have taxes. The following taxes are deductible as itemized deduction. We have state income tax or sales tax. We have real estate taxes. But that number there is limited to $10,000. The most an individual can deduct now in state and local state and local taxes is $10,000. Again, that's part of the tax reform bill. Then we have the section in interest. What type of interest is deductible? Currently, it's mortgage interest. Mortgage interest when you buy a home. So we're talking about first and second home. The cap on that, the principal balance would have to be no more than $750,000. That's the current under the tax reform bill. Home equity loan interest, no longer deductible. Generally speaking, that's no longer deductible. So if you get a home equity loan and you buy a new car, not deductible anymore. The interest won't be deductible anymore. So if you get a home equity loan to pay off your credit cards, not deductible anymore. Again, under old tax law, home equity loan interest was deductible. It's no longer deductible as part of the tax reform. Again, a lot of what I'm mentioning affects everybody, not just immigrants. Now, the exception to the home equity loan, if you use your home equity loan to if you remodel your home, if you do substantial improvements, capital improvements in your house, then that would qualify because that would be considered what's called acquisition indebtedness. In that case, it does qualify. But if you're doing something other than not related to home improvement, then it won't qualify. The next item that's deductible would be charity. If you make contributions to a qualified organization, then it would qualify. Cash contributions, and then also if you donate clothes to like Salvation Army, Goodwill, you get a deduction for that as well. And that's actually it. The other item that you may hear about is gambling losses. Gambling losses are still deductible, but you have to have gambling winnings. You actually have to have some type of income from gambling. And the rule is the most that you can claim in losses is limited to your winnings. If you have no winnings, you can't deduct any losses. So those are all the itemized deductions under current tax law as it is. So again, a non-resident alien would be forced to claim those itemized deduction. So if they had no property, so they have no real estate taxes, they have no mortgage interest. The only a couple items that they'll be able to deduct would be medical expenses, the state income tax, the very little state income tax, and any charitable contribution. Even if that amount is $100 or $200 or $300, they're forced to take the itemized deduction. Again, normally, if you qualify to be a resident alien, you can take the greater of the two, just like any other taxpayer. Again, that's what we would want to try to have somebody meet the resident alien test so it can benefit more for tax purposes.
Does the IRS ever challenge someone saying you're not considered to be a resident alien?
Yes, that's actually one of the items that does get challenged a lot. And they'll ask for supporting documentation, how many days you were in the United States, how many days you were in a different country. They'll ask for your passport. They'll ask for a lot of documentation. It's just like anything else. Anytime you get audited, you have to substantiate what you put on your tax return. So like, say for example, you claimed, I will just make up a number, $1,000 in donations to Salvation Army, and let's say the IRS sends you a notice. All you would have to do is provide them support. Send them the receipt that they give you when you make the donation. And then of course you would have to value it appropriately, and that would be it. The mistake a lot of people make when they do get audited, they don't have any documentation and they feel that they can somehow use their charm to negotiate with the IRS. That's not how it works. The IRS will ask for supporting documentation. If you don't have supporting documentation, you really have no leverage.
I have a question because in the past, people who supported family members in Mexico and Canada, if they provided 50% more of the support and could, again, substantiate it, they could deduct that. They could use them as a dependent.
Correct.
Is that still the case?
No, it's not. Actually, that's a very good question. Let me go over the formula that I just gave you a few minutes ago. Again, okay. Gross income minus standard deduction or itemized deduction equals taxable income. That's the current formula. The previous formula was actually gross income minus your itemized deduction or standard deduction minus your exemptions. That equals your taxable income. Okay. And under exemptions, again, one for yourself, one for your spouse, and anybody that qualifies as your dependent, which can include, in some cases, individuals that live in Mexico or Canada, assuming they meet the other tests. As I alluded to previously, the exemptions, that's gone. So any individual, that was the only tax benefit previously that was allowed for individuals that supported somebody outside of the country, for example, in Mexico. That's been eliminated. So the exemptions have been eliminated.
So I can't claim a dependent?
You can't claim you can't get any tax benefits for claiming. You can't claim anybody that's outside of the United States.
Okay, wow.
A couple of things that I wanted to review regarding certain credits that have been updated or increased as part of the tax reform bill. And it is actually, I'm glad that you asked me that question because I was actually going to use as an example. The child tax credit, it used to be $1,000, and the child tax credit means anybody who's a child that's related to you by blood, cousins do not count, and that dependent is under the age of 17. You would get a credit of $1,000. That was under old tax law. Under new tax law, is up to $2,000. But in order to qualify, that individual must have a Social Security number and must live in the United States. Another credit that they added is what's called a other dependent credit or credit for other dependents. It's a partial credit. It's a $500 credit if it meets certain tests. And those tests that it meets is actually what used to be the qualifying relative test. Going back to claiming somebody as an exemption under previous law, you would have to meet either qualifying child or qualifying relative test. And the qualifying relative test opened that door where you can claim somebody who's outside of the country, assuming that they're related to you by blood, and they meet the gross income test, which I'll get into that in a couple of minutes, and you support them over 100%. Now, going back to that credit that I just mentioned, that credit for other dependents, that's only allowed if that individual lives in the United States. And that person has to live in the United States. And that person can have a Social Security number and can have an ITIN. But if you have an ITIN and that individual lives in Mexico, it's no longer a deduction. So I guess what you asked me previously, can they claim a dependent outside of the country, there's really no tax benefit to do so because they don't get the exemptions anymore. That new credit that they added to balance the elimination of the exemption, that's only allowed for individuals in the United States, just as a child tax credit. So those are the big requirements. They want individuals to be the dependents to live in the United States for 12 months, or if they were born in the middle of the years, from the middle of the year to the end of the month, or the end of the year.
That's a big change affecting a lot of my clients out there.
It is. It's very big, and it's yeah. There's really no benefit for claiming somebody.
And I'm shuddering to think that some of the tax preparers are not going to have this information, and they're going to go ahead and they're going to claim exemptions. And
well, there's no line. There's the tax return, the actual form itself. It has changed, so there's really no place to put it. You know, you can't just make up a line number. You can't just put an actual
fair enough.
Return. The return looks differently. It's a totally different return. It's supposed to be simple, but it's actually more schedules, more pages on the actual tax return, and then the old schedules that we had before. Schedule A for itemized deduction, Schedule C for sole proprietor. Those are still there. But it's the tax return, that's the front page, and then it has all these supporting schedules, which you may or may not need depending on the situation.
Wow. A lot of changes. So people really do need to consult with a person who knows what they're doing.
Yes.
An accountant. Going to the local corner tax preparer is a good way to get into trouble, and it's very scary. So right now, the IRS has part of the shutdown, isn't it?
Yeah, that's my next topic I was going to cover regarding the shutdown. So the shutdown has been, what, close to a month, 20 plus days. It's affecting my business as well. So a lot of the IRS services are shut down. So not just government employees, my practice is actually affected by it as well. So let's say I'm trying to call the IRS and trying to ask, or I'm trying to obtain a tax transcript or a wage and income transcript. I can't do that anymore. That number doesn't work. You get this automated message that we're not in service right now. We'll get back to and up to date, or we'll get back on soon. And that's it. That's any number you call. If you call the general number, 1-800-829-1040 for tax question, you're not going to get through it as well. Nonetheless, the IRS has said that January 28th, that's when tax season is going to open. Somehow they're going to make it work. We're still required to file tax returns. The requirement is still the same regarding W-2s. Employers are supposed to give you W-2s at the end of the month, January 31st, so that's still a requirement. Those requirements are still there. So just because the government is shut down does not mean you cannot file the appropriate payroll tax return, W-2s, W-3s, any 940s and 941s. You still have to file that. You still got to pay your taxes. And now, as far as the refund goes, again, the IRS said they're still going to issue refunds, even though there's a shutdown. Now, there may be a couple of refunds that there may be a delay, as there was in previous years. That's still going to be there. So we're talking about individuals that claim earned income tax credit. There may be a delay for that. Or there is going to be a delay, I should say. If you're claiming what's called the American Opportunity Credit, there's going to be a delay on that. And also the child tax credit, there's going to be a delay on that as well. So what they do in that process, they're just reviewing the return. They're trying, I guess, a pre-audit, if you will. They're screening certain information to make sure it is that person does qualify for the earned income credit or child tax credit or the American Opportunity Credit. The reason for that, there has been a lot of fraud, or a lot of individuals, not just fraud, a lot of individuals incorrectly claiming those credits. Again, earned income credit, American Opportunity Credit if you go to college, or the child tax credit. That is something that the IRS does like to audit, and Congress passed a law that now they're going to actually give it, the IRS an opportunity to give them more attention.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you very much for this information, and you've agreed to come back on in March, right, so that people can start thinking about making sure they meet the April 15th. It's April 15th this year.
It's still the same due dates. Nothing has changed.
Even though it's shut down. Still the same.
One more comment I would like to make. So we have a new Congress. We have the 116th Congress that just started this month. Don't be surprised that if they pass a tax bill, the next week or so, that's retroactive for last year's, meaning they're going to pass it this year, but they'll have it effective in 2018, which they did last year, by the way. They did the exact same thing last year, and that has happened in the past. It wouldn't surprise me, so don't be surprised, but you never know. First, they got to open up the government.
Yes, and without a wall. I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. We look forward to seeing you in March, and I want to invite everyone to check us out the third Wednesday in February. Please come and have your immigration questions to ask. We look forward to seeing you. Please take care, and Godspeed. Thank you.
Thanks for having me again.